So this used to be the visiting room for the entire main facility. Now, as much as we tried to keep inmates somewhat classified and separated as much as possible based on their crimes and stuff like that, as you can see, there wasn't any separation. You'd have an inmate in here for check fraud visiting next to an inmate in here for multiple murders. By today's standards, we don't do that anymore. Our visiting rooms are designed specifically for the different custody levels. Most of our custody levels have an entire facility dedicated solely to that custody level. So if you're in level 5, level 6, you're going to have non-contact visits. You're going to visit through glass and a little speaker. As you move through the system, 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s, you're allowed to have contact visits where they can have a brief embrace and a kiss before and after the visit. They must sit across the table from their...
Weird.
Okay. Some people will say, oh, they had guns in here during the riot, the inmates just didn't find them. Well, if there were weapons in here, the inmates would have found them. They knew this prison better than the staff did. So if there were lethal weapons in here, they would have found them. If there weren't any lethal weapons in here, all that stuff was kept in the tower where you guys first walked in. But they did have some launchers and gas and stuff, so they did play with them during the riot. But these were designed for staff, for us to be able to launch chemicals down the corridor. One thing you didn't want to do in this place is piss off the barber. He'll cut your hair, but he'll probably cut your ear and your neck and do other things. So they were real good about maintaining the peace with the barbers and, you know, paying them whatever they were charging and stuff like that. So today at our lower levels, we do have barbers that cut the inmates' hair. They do cut staff's hair, but they don't have the... So this is the Catholic chapel. You can see on the wall where the crucifix once hung, the case where it was once stored, and then now, like I said, it's downtown at the cathedral. This one was left untouched pretty much. It did get some smoke and water damage, of course, but you can see where one of the light fixtures once hung. When they repaired the building, they just kind of painted over everything. They didn't really clean a whole lot. The very first tour that I did, somebody gasped, said, "Oh my God, there's an angel in there." I guess if you look at it the right way, you might see an angel or something in there. Kind of see a face with curly hair up on top, some wings there to the side. You know. If you look on that wall as well, that wall used to house the Stations of the Cross, which were brass plates that kind of hung off that wall there. It wasn't until we started doing tours that those silhouettes began to appear. I don't know if it's just because we're raising dust and it's sticking to something, or again, if it's some kind of a message being sent. But you know, you can actually see the outlines of the Station of the Cross on that wall. And it's been painted several times since they've been removed and stuff like that, so there's really no explanation for it. Okay? Back in the days of the old Maine, the old metal trays, real silverware, today we give them a plastic tray and a plastic sport pea. They're not allowed to have metal utensils or anything like that anymore. Another mural done by the inmates. The actual artists are the inmates, or the guys over there on the right-hand side. Rather than sign the mural, they just put their face in it. Kind of a large history of the state of New Mexico. There's a little bit of areas of that mural. If you look at some of the eyes, doesn't matter where you're at in the room, they're looking at you. They won't follow you about the room, but doesn't matter where you're at, you're not going to find out. On the back wall here, you'll see some of the remnants. There's been, I believe, somewhere around 28 movies or films shot here at the old prison. So this is the remnants of Into the West. This was the saloon when that little movie through. And what you see there is if you look out the windows here, you'll see the props that were left behind for the longest yard. The Adams Hammer, longest yard.
One more thing.
Inmates in this room. And the inmates would separate themselves or segregate themselves in whatever factions, races, gangs that they were running with at the time. And they had an understanding that if that section of the dining hall belonged to that group, nobody would go sit in that area. So you would have, your blacks in one corner, your whites in another corner, Hispanics in another corner, Indians or Native Americans in another corner. One gang would be on one side. The gangs, we kind of would try to feed them separately so we wouldn't have issues. Of course, we're still going to have issues anyway, it's prison. But even today at the lower custody levels, you'll see it where the inmates will sit in certain sections each and every time. To the point where certain inmates will sit in the same chair every single time. And it's just the way things run, where you have that understanding that you're not going to step on somebody's toes and cause problems. So.
Question, where does a new inmate sit?
Huh?
Where does a new inmate sit? If they don't have an affiliation?
They're not, in the olden days, they probably wouldn't have even got a seat, but today, it's changed so much that even the new inmates, they'll come in and, if they'll meet somebody that they knew in the county, or somebody will kind of take them under their wing, and so they'll find us table somewhere. But like I said, if they're African American, more than likely they're going to be in that section, regardless, at some point or whatever. If depending on their crime, they might have to sit in another section because that's where they're allowed to sit. So, it's not like when this place was open, if you were a newbie, you didn't need to sit down because they would take your tray anyway and eat your food. So we used to actually, if they were indigent, we would actually give them tobacco and rolling papers and stuff like that. But since we quit the smoking for the inmates, that's one of their drugs of choice now, is bringing tobacco into the facilities.
Where were they able to smoke? Just in their
They
cell?
could smoke anywhere. But when they started the ban on state facility, state buildings and smoking and stuff like that, we started about a year ahead of time. We let them know what was coming. We started kind of weaning them off little by little. We offered cessation classes, and the inmates actually took it better than the staff did. The actual prison version versus the movie version. So you look at this first cage here, that's one of our old segregation rec pens, one of the basketball courts where the seg inmates, one at a time, would get to go in there for an hour, play basketball, do push-ups, walk around in circles, whatever they wanted to do. Behind that one, you'll see the cage that was left behind from All the Pretty Horses. Easy to climb, easy to get out of, but it's the movie version. You see ours is a little bit more secure with the expanded metal. They can't climb it. What they would do with the big diamonds like this one is they get some permanent markers, preferably the metal case ones, and you can stick them in the holes, and they could actually climb the cages. They weren't gonna go anywhere, okay? But today we have much smaller expanded metal and much more difficult to climb. Upstairs, the inmates were drinking homemade alcohol. They decided that night, for whatever reason, if the officers were going to come in for count and do the same thing they do every other night and leave that door open, that they were going to take the officers and take the unit. My opinion is, I don't believe they thought it was going to go as far as it did that night. But because so many of the pieces, like I said, the grills were left open. You see, this grill secured here, that grill secured there, or even this grill to the dormitory is secured. It's isolated to the dormitory. But this grill was open, the grills going upstairs were open, and every grill in the hallway was open just like it is today. It didn't take much for these inmates to spill out of the dormitory here, 200 plus inmates, and now they have the rest of the institution. But this is where it all began. 3 officers went in for count. They were taken immediately, and the inmates began to proceed to take the entire facility. But like I said, all it took was this door to be closed, and it would have been isolated to this dormitory. Back then, they were the only ones that really had gangs in the prison system. There was only literally a dozen of each, but because they were organized and had a gang, they pretty much ran the prison. So when they put that cell block under construction, they had to put those guys somewhere. So they put them in some of the lower levels, the dormitories and stuff like that, which of course, they were gonna start assaulting and stealing, and, doing whatever. So that's what it happened. You put your maximum security inmates in a minimum security housing unit, it's just gonna create problems. Once they, they used to have 2 fences all the way around, they took one down. And then we have all right, guys, I'm going. So this is dormitory D1, aka the dining room from All the Pretty Horses, aka the training area for SEAL Team 6, National Geographic, and probably another couple of movies I haven't, or can't remember right now. But you can see this dormitory here, what you see is exactly the way it was after that weekend in 1980. There's no, effects in here. This is the actual damage that occurred during that weekend of the riot. The only change, you'll see the smaller windows on this side. All the Pretty Horses did that, but other than that, it's all original. So these dormitories were designed to hold about 50 men. You have 25 beds on each side. Then they added the bunk beds. So now you got 50 on each side. And you added a third row of bunk beds in the middle. Then you started adding mattresses on the floor in between the bunk beds. So you can kind of understand why the officers didn't want to come in and do counts at night. They were afraid to step on somebody's head and end up being in a fight with 200 plus inmates. You've got 200 inmates living in an area designed for 50, so you can imagine what kind of frustrations will develop in those situations. Okay. Back here you have the day room. That's where they could have their TVs, card games. Usually other bad stuff happens back there because most of the time the officers won't come past that doorway there just for their own personal safety.
Okay, and then there's another level above.
Yes, it's identical to this one. It's just upstairs. So you can imagine 100, 200 men down here, 100, 200 men up there, 100, 200 TVs, 100, 200 radios. This place was very loud all the time. You can even hear just with my voice how it echoes. Imagine all that other added noise. The prison closed. It actually used to look exactly like cell block 1 on the other side. But the movies have come in and modified it, like I said. This is the only cell block where you guys can go into the cells and close the doors. They do not lock. All they are is movie props. This is where the longest yard was filled. are filmed, Felons, and a few other movies were filmed inside this cell block. So you guys can go upstairs. Please do not go into that open door there on the end. But if you can imagine, this is your standard 6x8 cell, designed for one person. Usually there were 2 in each cell, and on many occasions there were 3 men to one of these cells. So again, you can imagine the type of frustration that you would encounter with 3 men sharing a 6x8 cell. Go ahead and take pictures. Many years ago, they used to issue us a little pocket knife, if you want to call it that. I'm sure when you guys buy your cosmetic kits, that little folding thing that doesn't cut hot butter, that's what they would issue us. In the event that an inmate would hang themselves, we would use or attempt to use those to cut the inmate down and keep them from killing themselves. Most of us would sharpen them up a little bit so they would actually cut something. But that's all it was. Today we use seatbelt cutters, okay, same concept. But the name Wadman actually was named after one of the inmates, who, of course, killed himself. So after that, they gave us a Wadman to prevent them from doing that. We don't issue them anymore. Like I said, we have seatbelt cutters in each of our control centers, where if we find an inmate hanging, we'll cut him down.
Most of the time? All the time?
Well, we might pull on his feet, but
Okay.
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We don't see it a lot anymore. I mean, here it's pretty easy. You can just pretty much jump over the rail. But at the facilities today, it's really not that easy. We've kind of hardened everything up so they can't. If they really want to, they will. But it really doesn't. You don't have to be actually hanging to hang yourself. Generally what they'll do is they'll just tie a shoelace around their neck, tight enough to where it cuts off the circulation. They go to sleep, they stop breathing, and they kill themselves. So you don't really see the actual person hanging anymore like we used to back in those early days. Where most of the magic happened on that weekend, 19 of the 33 murders that occurred on that weekend were said to have occurred here in Cell Block 4. Everything from beheadings to throwing people over the piers to putting blow torches to their heads, burning them alive, you name it, it happened. They would cut